Copyright, copy responsibly. This year you're going to be creating what I like to call multimedia content projects. And multi, as you know, means many different things, many different kinds of media that you're going to be putting together to tell me something, to explain something to me, or to demonstrate a skill to me. Before you start any multimedia project that I'm going to assign you, you have to be aware there are some rules and laws that govern what you're allowed to actually do when you use someone else's creativity or their intellectual property, their creation, their drawing, their thoughts, their ideas, their project. If you misuse someone else's creativity and you don't give credit where credit is due, you don't ask their permission, or you just plain take it, that's theft. That's theft of their intellectual or intelligent property, their creativity, and you are subject to law. There can be a monetary or a money value attached to your, what they call a white-collar crime. There's been a lot of news about downloading videos illegally or downloading music and using it, and it's the same principle. The person who wrote that song and published that album and put all that time and effort into creating that song is entitled to the purchase price of their creativity. So even though you're not creating a platinum record or a platinum CD, you are going to be creating using someone else's information, and you have to be careful how you use it. Now I know you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, this is for a project at school, does that matter? Yes. Even though I'm the only one that sees it, if you can't get permission, believe it or not, there's only a little bit you're allowed to use. So now you're saying, okay, so let's just say I want to use some of this multimedia that doesn't belong to me in a presentation. How do I ask permission? Well, I'm going to explain that a little later, but it's simple sometimes. It's just sending an email. Okay, so if I can't get permission, like the person is dead, how much of their intellectual property am I allowed to use? And you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, if they're dead, how are they going to know? A lot of intellectual property, because it's copyrighted, is part of an inheritance. And so their estate may be gaining revenue from it. So whether you're robbing from them directly or robbing from their great-great-great-great-grandchildren, theft is theft. I like to use what I call the CARE principle. Check to see if something is copyrighted. Ask to use it if it's possible. Respect their hard work by acknowledging it in your project, and then edit that property within the confines of what the law allows if you cannot get permission. So let's start with C, check for copyright. That's the copyright symbol right there. And that's a pretty big symbol that I put on there. But anytime you see that C in a circle, it's protected material, and you have to respect that. Sometimes it may not have a C on it, but there may be a declarative statement that says may be subject to copyright laws or may be subject to permission. Look for those sorts of statements when you're looking at borrowing any kind of property. And sometimes it just comes flat out and says, if you want to use this video or this picture or this clip art, email me at something, and you could either gain permission for free or there's a small fee depending on how big and how famous the person is. So start by asking permission. You know that Mr. Jones is a local historian who made a little video on YouTube, and he lives right here in Kutztown, and you want to use part of his video or all of his video in your History Day project, and you want to display it when you get to states and to nationals. You have to ask his permission. So you send him an email and you ask if you may use it, and you specify that you're using it as part of your History Day project. It's not just a regular school project. This is something that's going to go public and is going to be judged. So anything used for competitions, History Day, Future City, Science Olympiad, all of those things have to be documented correctly. Or you're going to be making an iMovie for science class and you're going to load it to YouTube. And you know that Ms. Smith has a collection of nature photos that she took. She's a famous photographer, and you want to use them. And you want to use all of them from her collection. You might send her an email or a letter. Or, better yet, you're looking at this little project and you're going, wow, those grandchildren of Mrs. Beitelman's are just so cute. So's the dog. I want to know if I can use her images in a project for health class. Well, you know where to find me. I'm in room 203, or you can email me and we'll talk. We'll see. If you're quoting somebody or you're using part of a writing or an essay or a poem, sometimes you can't ask permission. Maybe they're dead. And you don't know if it's part of what we call the public domain, meaning it isn't protected by copyright law anymore. You still have to give it credit. You can't just pass off a Dickens writing as one of your own. It doesn't belong to you. But again, we're talking about the difference between how much you're going to use. Let's go back to respect a little bit here. That's the R in care. And I just mentioned that previously. Giving credit. Always, always, always give credit. Even if you're not using the whole thing, and you don't have to ask for specific permission to go over a certain amount, you're still going to have to give credit. Now, this is a portrait of the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is considered a public domain picture. However, this particular image of the Mona Lisa in the frame, as you see it here, I took from a website that is sponsored by the Louvre Museum in Paris. Now, the Mona Lisa herself is part of the public domain, but in this particular image that I'm using, I borrowed it from the Louvre. And the Louvre has an entire page on their website. If you're going to be using any of the art from their museum that they have on their website, how you have to use it and represent it. They're very specific, so don't be afraid to look around. Basically, what they're asking is that you give credit where credit is due, and I'm using the MLA method here. Leonardo da Vinci, by the way, was the painter, and this was painted in 1503. Obviously, Leonardo da Vinci is quite dead, so I can't ask his permission. But I do want to make sure that you know that Leonardo da Vinci is the creator of this particular painting. But I got it from the Louvre in France, from their website, so I included the website. This is how you cite using the MLA method if you're using an image from someplace like the Louvre. My favorite reminder for all my students is don't fight it, cite it. This is an example of a works cited page or a bibliography. And these two examples are actually written work. It says right there, print. I know we're not talking about some sort of multimedia presentation right now, but the bottom line is, if you are using someone else's ideas to formulate an opinion, you have to give them credit for having helped you formulate your opinion. So a works cited page or a bibliography is where you're going to put all of the information that you use to develop your project, whether it's a printed book, it's a website, it's a music clip, whatever you're going to use in that project, this is where you're going to tell me what you've used. The edit portion is where you're going to get the boundaries that you must adhere to in order to use intellectual property when you can't get permission to use intellectual property. If it's a poem, you're only allowed to use 250 words max. Now, if it's less than 250 words, you can use the whole poem, but whether you use the whole poem or only 250 words of it, you still must cite it in your works cited page. You have to do that. If it's an article, an essay, or a short story, 2,500 words is your maximum. A book or a journal article is only 10%. That's not very much. If it's a photographer and their photographs are not copyright protected, you are allowed to use 5 maximum. If they are copyright protected, you are expected to get permission. If you can't, then the 5 max rule applies. Any video clips or videos from a movie, a documentary, or even a Batman movie. 10% of that movie or 3 minutes, whichever is smallest. Odds are it's going to be 3 minutes. That's the most you're allowed to use. Music, 10%. That's it. So when we do the morning announcements in the morning, very rarely does a song ever finish. And that's because we're only allowed to use 10% of that music. And that's not very much. It's not. And that's because that creation doesn't belong to you. You didn't make it. Now, most people publish things on the internet because they want people to see their pictures or hear their music or read their ideas. So yes, they want it out there, but they want you to ask permission to use it. That's how they become famous. So put yourself in their shoes. You wouldn't want somebody stealing your homework and handing it in with your name on and taking the credit for it. So we're back to, but it's just a school project. And that's right, it is. Even though it stays between you and your teacher, if you don't follow the guidelines of that 250 word max or the 10%, 3% rule, you could be looking at a plagiarism grade, which is technically a 0. Plagiarism is where you use someone else's ideas and pass them off as your own. So if you go over those clips, you could be in trouble. If you don't cite your clips, you could be in trouble. So don't fight it. Do the right thing. Cite all your information and sources in your bibliography and stay within the guidelines that I gave you on the slide. It's just so much easier that way. I hope you enjoyed Copyright Copy Responsibly. Please make note of the information concerning the images used in this presentation, and thank you.